What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fifth album by Lil Boosie. Basically, this album is called Incarcerated, and it came out in the fall of 2010. Now, this was during Lil Boosie's prison sentence. He was going to prison for 4 years. He got sentenced to 4 years in late 2009 just because the prison sentence was doubled. It was originally supposed to be 2 years, but it became 4 years. And then in 2011, it almost became 8 years because apparently drugs almost got smuggled into the prison or something like that. But this is kind of a concept of an album where I do like this album quite a bit, but I kind of question what it would have been like had Lil Boosie had the creative focus to be able to do it. Because it feels like this was kind of a hodgepodge of songs that were on Lil Boosie's hard drive. And speaking of that, the reason why there weren't more Lil Boosie projects between like 2010 and 2014 when he got out was just because the feds confiscated like Lil Boosie's hard drive with all his old music on there. So the stuff that he probably worked on in 2008, 2009, that type of stuff was just not, they took it, they confiscated it, so he wasn't able to put out more music, which is kind of unfortunate because this is actually a pretty stellar album. This is a small taste of what Lil Boosie was kind of on back in 2009, that type of stuff. I feel like still Superbad is the better album, but the only reason for that is just because it had his creative focus and he was able to craft that album because he wasn't in prison. Now, it's kind of murky, the territory as to when Lil Boosie went to prison. There's varying kind of degrees of what happened. Like supposedly he went to prison in November 2009, but then he didn't get sentenced until June of 2010 or something like that. So he was in prison for about 4.5 years, but I don't know the real extent as to the exact day that he went to prison and stuff. That's kind of the concept. I know he was at least not in prison when he dropped Superbad very briefly, but I just kind of look after it. This was the project Trill ENT managed to put out this album, and this comprised something. I'm not sure if Lil Boosie actually, I mean, the execution behind it, this is kind of almost like a miniature compilation album just because there's a lot of guests on here and there's like some songs that are not complete Lil Boosie songs just because there's only like one verse or two verses by him. But I think the concept, this would have been a pretty intricate album. And despite the fact that it doesn't have like the bells and whistles of like an album manifesto with the A&Rs and the comprisement of how that sort of stuff worked out, it is pretty stellar. I feel like it's a worthy follow-up to Superbad, which I gave Superbad a 10 out of 10 if you didn't know that. So it's this kind of thing. I definitely feel like that was a pretty excellent album. And in my opinion, I feel like this is a better album than 2006's Badass. I feel like it edges out that project. I mean, once again, this only has one single. It's more understandable that this project only has one single this time just because he was in prison for 4 years and wasn't able to craft stuff. I just kind of look after it. Really, the whole concept about it is there's just not, like, on Superbad, he managed to snag Trina for a feature and Bobby V, Young Jeezy, those type folks. There were some extra bells and whistles on the 2009 project, but it's basically just Trill ENT on this particular album. So all the stuff that Lil Boosie was probably going to work on and the people he was going to branch out and reach out to just doesn't really happen on here. These are just, a lot of these just kind of feel like, and it's not like this is a bad album, they just kind of feel like melded kind of ideas of stuff that maybe was going to happen, but just didn't get fleshed out enough to really happen. It just feels like a bunch of, this project feels like a lot of afterthought, kind of musing kind of songs as far as that kind of goes, just thoughts and ideas that were mused upon, but just didn't really get fleshed out enough to really become like actual songs. I think the concept of that, just getting like some spare hard drive kind of songs from Lil Boosie is still pretty kick-ass because a lot of these are pretty dope. But just when you compare like Superbad, the Return of Boosie Badass, to this one, I feel like Superbad just has a lot more gloss and just more marketability. And that's just, this is more like Incarcerated is more like the street album that just has a more raw and rugged type feel and this kind of edginess that it does have some club bops on here and a little bit more moments, but it just doesn't have like the gloss of the marketability as to how some of that would kind of work. That's just kind of the thing about it. It's a pretty stellar project. I do feel like this is going to get a pretty relatively rave score. It's not going to get a 10, but I do feel like it's good enough to say that it's worth fucking with, despite the fact that Lil Boosie's real execution was not fully around on this just because he was serving a prison sentence. That's this kind of thing. It's worthwhile. I feel like, certain rappers like Lil Wayne dropped I Am Not a Human Being in 2010, which was a pretty excellent project, and that I gave that record a 10. But I look after this is a pretty awesome project to sit there and kind of get the concept of just seeing what Lil Boosie could do just when he's making spare songs that are just kind of more mused upon ideas and just kind of like they're just kind of thoughts rolling around in his head more so than actual fleshed out ideas as far as that kind of goes. But we'll talk about the singles. There's one single on here and it's Better Not Fight. There's one single on this album and it's Better Not Fight, and that has Better Not Fight has Webby, Lil Trill, and Fox on here, so it's good that he managed to put this out because really on this song, Better Not Fight, Lil Boosie just does. Really on the first single, Better Not Fight, Lil Boosie only drops one verse on here, so that's kind of the concept. It's more of like a Trill ENT kind of affair, but it's just basically the reason why behind it was just because of the prison sentence. So it's too bad that we didn't get like a second verse. Just wondering what the mechanics of that song turned out to kind of be, because I'm curious as to why Lil Boosie would only lay one verse on a song and then not do at least a second one or something like that, because this could have turned out to be a pretty good bop. To talk about this song, to talk about Better Not Fight, it's a jam and house party cut. It's a full house kind of cast, and it's just a ground level kind of dap party jam. I definitely feel like this is an entry kind of house party jam for just getting some dap and pounds and that type of stuff and just kind of kicking it in the initial kind of synchronizing as far as that kind of goes. It really works as like a pretty stellar house party jam. Like there were a couple house party cuts on Superbad, but this one's a lot more oriented. This really feels like a pretty rave variation of like 2010s. This feels like a pretty rave orientation of 2010s house party music. I like the concept of this just because there weren't a ton of house party rap songs in the early 2010s. Like Eminem wasn't doing this, Lil Wayne wasn't doing this too much, Gutta Gutta wasn't doing this, Waka Flocka kind of did with like that Grove Street party, but it just wasn't oftenly kind of happening as much. And I kind of look after this as a good example of Boosie's kind of ferocious and energetic kind of energy and such. This is a good example of just getting like a real slammer of a song. And I just wonder if he had not went to prison for the 4.5 years that he did, if he had been around in 2010 to have been able to do stuff, I wonder how this song would have turned out and who he would have actually thrown on here. I mean, for what it is, I like hearing Webby, Lil Trill, and Fox on here. They're all pretty kick-ass on here, but it just kind of, it's sans mostly Lil Boosie. He just shows up on the first verse and then he doesn't really get to really execute the song as well as could have happened. But just kind of an afterthought. Like a lot of these songs kind of are afterthoughts just because they don't have like the sheer polish and execution that they were going to necessarily need to fit an album. I think this definitely could have been a pretty hit single. I would have liked this. I would have definitely liked to have seen this song a lot. It has pretty carrying energy. It's a jam and house party cut, like I was saying. So it just really has that kind of valve as far as that kind of goes. But it just kind of comes off as not necessarily half baked, but just kind of an afterthought of an idea just because it doesn't have the execution. I just wonder who would have been on here. I wonder if Lil Boosie would have thrown like Plies on here or Jeezy on here again or someone like that. E40 would have been a good one. Afro Man, just people, maybe not Afro Man would have happened, but you know, just someone, just a low key kind of cut Too Short would have been a good example of throw on here, something like that. But this is kind of the thing. So that's really the only single on this project. It was supposed to just be like an interim and kind of stopgap project until Lil Boosie eventually got out of prison, because originally he was going to get out. They didn't know. He might have gotten out of prison 2011, 2012 or so if he had followed the parole protocol and that type of stuff, if he had followed the measures and that sort of thing. But at that time, it was just kind of uncertain as to when he was going to get out. Some folks said 2013, 2014, and eventually it would have almost been another 4 years on top of that one when what happened in 2011 kind of happened. But that was kind of the concept. It was just stopgap, just something to kind of ease the appetite. It was just something to kind of ease the appetite and kind of give people like the interim fix while Lil Boosie was kind of tied down in prison and that type of stuff. So it's just kind of the thing. But talk about the songs on here. There's 10 songs out of 14 I wound up recommending. 9.5 songs. 9 songs I recommend, 1 almost songs. Those 9 songs would be Devils, Better Not Fight, Cartoon, Thugged Out, Calling Me, Do It Again, Long Journey, Betrayed, and Bankroll Part 2. And then the almost song is Chill Out. So to talk about the almost song, Chill Out. This is a mellow, kind of preachy, ruminating cut. I feel like this is a decent song for musing. It's a good smoke sessions kind of song. It's just a good homely song. I feel like normally when I complain about homely songs, it's not having enough effectualness or good tempo about them to really do. But Lil Boosie does a good example of making a homely song and more kind of down tempo, kind of thought provoking kind of song. This is a good example of it, but it's an almost song just because the mellowness. I mean, I kind of feel like it's a little bit overly preachy. I like the concept of Lil Boosie kind of conveying some of the stories that he's had and that type of stuff, but it is somewhat preachy. And I just look at the concept. It's just kind of a more sluggish tone, but I do like it. It's decent. It's one I would still recommend. I'm just kind of on the fence about it. That is a nice one. The most popular song on this album, according to Spotify, is Betrayed. This has some me against the world type feels about it. It's a real song, I definitely feel like. And it's kind of like a nice, floaty, kind of boppish kind of beat. Definitely like the kind of airy, boppish kind of feel, that particular beat on there. And it's just some club paranoia. Like Lil Boosie has a lot of paranoia on this album. Songs like Devils, songs like Betrayed, songs like Chill Out, songs like there's another one on here like Long Journey. There's just some good ones where Lil Boosie kind of has that Tupac and Master P type paranoia where he kind of gets back. Like Superbad didn't quite have as much Tupac and Master P affluence, but I kind of feel like this album kind of gets back to some of those vibes of Master P kind of affluence, like Badass kind of had. It's kind of shows a lot of flattery from Master P, I would have to say, which is pretty dope because Master P has some good albums like Ghetto D and that type of stuff. I would have to say Betrayed is a good example of some paranoia. Bankroll 2 is a nice one. Bankroll 2, Bankroll Part 2 has a UGK like beat. This is definitely something I could see Bun B and Pimp C rapping to. It's just a mellow kind of summer afternoon kind of breeziness type tune. Definitely like the lazy kind of summer day feel of that one. It's a hustle tune and it just feels like a regular kind of day. It's a regular kind of bop as far as that kind of goes. Definitely like the simmering kind of affluence of this particular song. It's just a nice one. Another one that's pretty good is Calling Me. I feel like Calling Me is a nice in the cut song for chicas and that type of stuff. I feel like this is kind of more of a hangout song or a late evening kind of weaving around at night kind of tune. It's just a good bop for that sort of concept. Just kind of being like a late night lounge lizard, that type of stuff. Some of those type bops as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of weaving through the evening, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock p.m., waking up around that time, hanging out with some chicas, that type of stuff. Just kind of mellow, kind of breeziness. I do like some of these kind of fares as far as that kind of goes. There's not really like a club song for the ladies this time. Doesn't really have that kind of stunt and flashiness, but there just are some kind of low-key hangout ones. Another one that kind of does that is Do It Again. Another low-key kind of hangout song for the ladies is Do It Again. This has a very much 21 Questions like feel about it. This is very similar to 50 Cent's 21 Questions. Has that same kind of ruminating, asking questions to your lady type tune about it. It's just more of a mellow and kind of lazy breeze type tune compared to that one, where 21 Questions was a lot more of just kind of like a sullen, kind of down, rainy day kind of tune. This one's a lot more mellow and lazy breeze type feel about it. It's just some nice summer malaise, and it kind of has like a Master P like feel in the production also. It just kind of feels like if you mix like Master P's Ghetto D, some of that kind of with like that ghetto summer malaise with like 50 Cent's 21 Questions. That's what you'd have for Do It Again. It's a pretty good one. Long Journey is a nice one. This is not necessarily a party tune or a jivey kind of one, but this is kind of like a Scarface-like tune. Scarface the rapper definitely has some similarities to the stuff Scarface did in like the late 90s, early 2000s and such. Just a nice ruminating, up-tempo haze kind of song. Definitely has some haziness feel about it, and this is it really captures like the paranoia and anxiety real well. This is just the example with Lil Boosie having his lengthy prison sentence and the stuff that was kind of on his mind. This is another good example of some of that Tupac like paranoia. This works real well. This is a good example of this real malaise and kind of anguish kind of song that does it pretty damn well. So you feel the emotions in this one. Cartoon is a pretty nice one. This is a trippy kind of sluggish club hopper. Definitely song with drip and kind of that swaggerish kind of charisma about it. It's just one of the murkier beats on the album, and it's kind of a club gem. Definitely feel like it could be for a strip club and that type of stuff. This really has that kind of murky and sluggish kind of energy about it. It's just kind of a lot of sleaze and malaise on the song as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of a drug-addled kind of evening, something like that. Good 10:30, 11:30 p.m. type tune as far as that kind of goes about it. Lil Boosie has a pretty energized verse on here. It's just interesting kind of get these cats on such an offhanded kind of song as far as that kind of goes. But I do like that one. There's not many club songs on here. I feel like Cartoon, Better Not Fight, which is more of a house party tune, and then maybe Thugged Out are the only ones that really do it. Maybe Betrayed. This kind of happens to be a thing. But so talk about Devils. This is another one that has a lot of paranoia. I don't know if I talked about this one, but Devils is a really nice one. This is an extreme song about paranoia and that type of stuff. I don't know if I talked about this one, but I'll talk about it again. It's a twinkling, kind of haunting tune about demons and stuff going on in your mind and that type of stuff as far as just having some problems. It's got some real hellish paranoia about it, and it's a good defiant kind of bop. I feel like Lil Boosie keeps like it. Lil Boosie stands on his feet and just kind of says, fuck it. I feel like that's a good concept as far as that kind of goes. This is sort of stuff that Tupac would do pretty well. He was always saying, fuck the world in those type moments. So this is kind of like a defiant bop from Lil Boosie. Definitely like the concept of some of these devilish kind of tunes. Really has like a twinkling kind of beat on here. It's just a real sparky, good song to smoke to, but it's just a trippy kind of tune. It just has like that haunting kind of shrill, kind of anguish, demonic kind of feel about it too. It's just a good capture of just like a kind of grim kind of tune as far as that kind of goes. And then Thugged Out. And then Thugged Out kind of has like a circus like, dark, trippy type beat as far as that kind of goes. It's a good song for evening fare, I definitely feel like. And it's a good song for getting ready to get some times going, that type of stuff. A good evening, 7:30, 8:30 p.m. type tune. Maybe not quite wholesomely like in the club, like Cartoon or Devils or Betrayed or uh, Better Not Fight or some of those, but it's definitely kind of a conduit song to kind of get things popping as far as that kind of goes. Picking up some swishers, getting to the house, ordering pizza, that type of stuff as far as some of that kind of goes. Getting some 2 liters, just that kind of stuff. Real kind of good song for just getting ready to pop off as far as that kind of goes. This real circus-like kind of dark, this real kind of circus-like dark trippy kind of energy about it. So it's a nice one. That's basically the songs on this album. So to talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy, this is the 4 songs I didn't enjoy, which I really could not get into the productions of You Don't Know and How We Do It that well. Those were just kind of plotting ones that just didn't have like a lot of execution. I feel like because some of this were just kind of after, I feel like because some of these were just kind of afterthoughts by Lil Boosie, the concept behind it is it may not have had the sheer execution of songs that he may have actually wanted. I feel like maybe these are just songs that he did, but maybe they just were meant for a mixtape or something. So I kind of look after it. Some of these just didn't quite stand quite as tall. I didn't really like the kind of awkward beat of The Rain. I didn't like the low piano keys beat of What I Learned from the Streets. That one was just kind of a clumsy one, just didn't really capture the energy that well. And then The Rain was kind of a similar song to that. There just were some low kind of tempo kind of ones that just didn't have like a lot of, there just were some low kind of tempoed ones that just didn't capture like the energy that Lil Boosie needed. I mean, he's a decent storyteller and I do feel like he has like that, but he just needed more songs to kind of showcase some of his energy. I really think he needed some stand-up songs. I really feel like Lil Boosie needed more stand-up songs more so than sit-down songs. And some of these songs like The Rain and What I Learned from the Streets are just kind of more of just like ruminating kind of songs, but they just don't capture the energy like they did on like Badass and Super Bad and some of those records. I feel like some of these were just kind of afterthought kind of songs that didn't really have the comprise of what he probably would have done had it been like an actual album rollout that he was trying to do. So this didn't work quite as well. And then just on top of that, Chill Out was kind of an almost song, but I do like that one enough to recommend it somewhat. So that's this kind of thing. So me liking 9.5 songs out of 14 on here. I'm going to go ahead and give this album, me liking 9.5 songs out of 14, I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.5 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty damn good. There's definitely a lot of quality on this project, but I kind of feel like because Lil Boosie wasn't able to flesh out this album entirely between his prison sentence and that type of stuff, I kind of feel like it doesn't have like the sheer bite that probably, I mean, just the fact that this album got this high of a score without his actual execution really shows the quality of him as an artist. Like, I feel like Superbad is a 10 out of 10 album, and this is better than Badass from 2006, but I just feel like the stuff just doesn't have the full-blown execution that it needs just because it doesn't have his creative control. And there's some songs on here that kind of feel like filler that probably either shouldn't have been on the actual album or just were kind of chopped up kind of ideas that just needed better execution of what they were supposed to do. So that's just kind of the thing about it. But in terms of the social score, I kind of feel like the social score, I'm not going to give an 8.5. I'm going to give the social score, actually, I'll give the social score an 8 out of 10 because there's enough quality on here, but there's not an overabundance of Lil Boosie. There's a lot of guest songs on here, and I feel like some of these moments that could have given Lil Boosie more shine just didn't quite show up as much. I mean, there's quite a bit of quality. There are some ousting kind of moments and night out kind of moments and that type of stuff, but it's not an overabundance. It's not quite as turned up as Superbad was, but I do feel like the concept that he does have a compelling character. He's very similar to Tupac and Master P and Mystical, some of those type folks that could do those versatile type tunes. That just has a good concept as far as that kind of goes. But I look after it like, yeah, it's just a notch turned down in the littiness, but I do feel like it does have some social moments. Definitely some good smoking moments and just some overall kind of breezy kind of afternoon, evening, and early nightlife. Not quite the pitch of the night, but just enough moments to kind of have some smoke sessions and good enough to have some good smoke sessions and some lively sessions too. So that's just kind of the thing. But in terms of the future, like Lil Boosie has dropped an album. He dropped an album in June of 2023, so that's pretty dope. And then on top of that, he's dropped a number of albums. He has 44 mixtapes, which I didn't realize. He has an assload of mixtapes. I'm going to start getting to some of these. I'm going to get to some more of these albums. So that's this kind of thing. But this is a pretty quality album. Despite the fact that Lil Boosie didn't really have creative control of this project, it is still an above average release despite all that.